The South Pole is more than penguins and endless snow. There's a hidden ghost world within it. Look, it's right here on the globe. Don't confuse Antarctica with the Arctic, which is at the top of our maps. Much smaller in size, and, let's face it, way less mysterious. The ice sheet covering Antarctica is about 1 to 3 miles thick, which is up to 16 Eiffel Towers stacked on each other. This massive blanket hides the true features and contours of Antarctica's land. We still don't know much about this mysterious continent, and it is ice and snow that are to blame. We still don't even know the true shape and size of this continent. Mapping Antarctica without some huge shovels is an incredibly hard task. But satellites learned to penetrate the ice with their cameras. And now we know there's actually an enormous, dramatic ancient landscape beneath the snow. The ghost of the past. About 90 million years ago, Antarctica was a much warmer place. It was actually a lush rainforest with tons of plants and probably teeming with life. It even had rivers flowing through it. Then the ice came. This happened about 34 million years ago, during the transition from the Eocene to the Oligocene, when our planet cooled significantly. It was the beginning of one of our several ice ages. The land remained, but now was hidden under ice and snow that got thicker and thicker. To a regular eye, Antarctica turned into a white desert, vast, flat, and featureless. Time went on. This massive ice sheet moved around, smoothing and shifting the ground beneath it. Over the millions of years, it changed what the land looked like. Now, if we looked under the ice, it wouldn't hold any signs of the original South Pole, except for one place. In areas where the ice is especially thick and doesn't move much, like in East Antarctica, it has actually worked the other way around. It became like a super thick blanket that protects the land. Normally, things like wind or rain slowly wear away the ground over time, changing its shape. But since we have this protective ice blanket, it prevents these natural processes from reaching the stuff underneath. So, the ground stayed almost the same for millions of years, like it's been frozen in time. This special area near the Aurora and Schmidt subglacial basins has become the ghost of Antarctica's landscape. This place was barely touched even since it was first covered in snow 34 million years ago. This is a historical footprint, a place that can tell us what Antarctica's ground looked like before it became a freezing nightmare. As scientists peered under East Antarctica, they saw an amazing ghost. The traces of the rivers that were flowing there millions of years ago, various valleys, and some weird little islands, as well as 3 big chunks of land shaped like the letter U. Hey, what's that all about? You see, the continents on our planet are moving constantly, sliding along the red-hot lava mantle like cereal on milk. Over history, they came together and broke apart several times. Hundreds of millions of years ago, several continents were a part of one enormous Gondwana. Antarctica was one of them. It used to be one huge landmass. But when Gondwana broke apart, the poor continent got stretched by tectonic forces. Parts of land were pulled away from each other. Whoosh! And they got torn apart. And that's how we got these big chunks or blocks of land under thick layers of ice. In any case, scientists now want to explore this ghost a bit more. But to study it deeply, they need to actually drill down through the ice, like using a straw to get to the bottom of a thick shake. This will help them pick up some rocks and dirt from way below to learn more about the Earth's history and climate. Antarctica is the 5th largest continent in the world, approximately bigger than the entirety of Europe or Australia, competing with the entire South America in size. Aside from East Antarctica, we discussed there are several more regions: Antarctica Peninsula, South Pole, West Antarctica, and the Ross Sea. The continent is basically a frozen sandbox, and all its hidden, mysterious landscape is actually less explored than Mars's terrain. We only know for sure that without ice, it wouldn't just be flat and empty, but an entire world full of big mountains, huge canyons, and even fiery volcanoes. Some of these volcanoes are so huge that they peak above the layers of snow. In West Antarctica alone, there are at least 138 volcanoes, though only about 8 or 9 are active today. One of the craziest ones is Mount Erebus, the southernmost volcano and the tallest one on the continent, about 12,500 feet high. And deep beneath the ice sheet, this guy hosts incredible, beautiful subvolcanic caves. The temperatures there are warm enough for t-shirts. The Antarctic Peninsula, or Lesser Antarctica, looks like a bunch of mountainous islands deeply underground. It has newer volcanic rocks that are part of the Pacific Ring of Fire, which is like a giant circle of volcanoes and earthquake zones around the Pacific Ocean. The Greater Antarctica is a huge part, almost as big as Australia. It consists of East Antarctica and the South Pole. Beneath the ice, it's a place of rocks that have been around for a very, very long time, including the special zone we mentioned. You probably know that Antarctica is nearly devoid of humans. No wonder, with a mean temperature of about -46 degrees Fahrenheit. But even though this place is horrifyingly cold and deserted, life still clings on. You guessed it, in the underworld. In 2017, scientists found DNA traces of algae, moss, and even possibly unknown small animals in the deep caves. That means that even in such crazy conditions, there are still unique ecosystems thriving in little isolated warm pockets beneath the snow. There was another incredible find beneath Antarctica's Ross Ice Shelf, a lively ecosystem vibing within an underground river. Scientists have long suspected that Antarctica's underworld should have some freshwater lakes and rivers. One day, a satellite spotted a groove there. They decided to explore it and used a hot water drill to melt their way through the ice. As they reached the underworld, they dropped a camera into one of those hidden fresh rivers. And at first, they thought they'd find just some rocks or something. But instead, they stumbled upon hundreds of amphipods, tiny shrimp-like creatures. Little ones instantly swarmed around the lens. Shrimps blocked the camera and scientists couldn't check out what they wanted to. Pretty funny, but at least that means that there really is an important ecosystem deep within Antarctica. Now, they're gonna explore it. And all this is just the beginning of the mysterious underworld. Antarctica's snow also hides the deepest canyon on Earth under the Denman Glacier. Well, Mariana Trench is still the deepest point on Earth, but it's a part of the oceanic crust, geologically speaking. Also, in 1958, explorers found a huge mountain range under the ice, as big and tall as the famous Alps Mountains. The range stretched for about 745 miles with peaks as high as 1.7 miles. And all this magnificence is buried under tons of ice. Who knows what else we might find there? Antarctica holds about 60% of our entire planet's freshwater, which means it would be pretty bad if it melted. For example, there's this Doomsday Glacier, officially known as Thwaites Glacier. It's a huge ice formation, about the size of Florida, and it's melting right now. Every year, the sea levels rise by 4% because of it. If this guy melts away completely, the sea levels all around the world will increase by 2 feet, which might not sound like a lot, but it would be catastrophic for coastal areas. Luckily, researchers have found that even if its ice shelf were to collapse in the next 50 years, the glacier itself wouldn't retreat as quickly as they feared. It's still losing ice rapidly, but it would be quite a slow process.
We've all dreamed of visiting the Arctic and witnessing the natural wonders of polar bears frolicking on ice floes or the aurora borealis dancing across the sky. Well, sorry to break it to you, but you won't find any tourists flocking to Antarctica anytime soon. Why, you may ask? Let's dive into it. First off, where is Antarctica? It's located in the southern hemisphere, specifically at the South Pole. The Southern Ocean surrounds it, and most of the continent is covered by ice, making it one of the most remote and frigid places on Earth. Now, have you ever met someone who's visited Antarctica? Probably not. It's one of the least visited places on the planet, and only a handful of lucky explorers have seen its interior, which is mostly made up of glaciers and ice fields. But trust me when I say the wildlife and scenery are out of this world. Why shouldn't you travel to Antarctica? Well, for starters, the environment is incredibly fragile and can be easily damaged. Plus, there are no native human populations on the continent, so your travels would essentially be like visiting an uninhabited island. And let's not forget that it's also one of the most expensive destinations to travel to. Despite all that, Antarctica is not exactly guarded like a fortress, but there is an international agreement called the Antarctic Treaty. This treaty was negotiated to prevent any unwanted activity on the continent and bans some forms of testing done there by member states. But the primary reason we can't just waltz into Antarctica is that it has a delicate ecosystem that needs protection. The treaty states that Antarctica should be used for peaceful purposes only and should be free from any human activity that could harm the environment. Scientists are still learning about the continent's unique ecosystem, and our activity and machines could disrupt the delicate balance that exists there. If you're still itching to go to Antarctica, getting permission isn't exactly a walk in the park. US citizens, for example, need to complete a special form and send it to the Office of Ocean and Polar Affairs. And once you're there, you'll need to follow some strict guidelines to protect the environment, like not disturbing any wildlife or taking souvenirs like rocks, plants, or animals. Now, technically, can you live in Antarctica? While there are no laws banning people from living there permanently, it's a very inhospitable environment and unsuitable for human habitation. Temperatures can reach -76 degrees Fahrenheit and below, making it nearly impossible for anyone to survive without the proper equipment and experience. Plus, the nearest piece of land is over 1,000 miles away, making any inhabitants completely cut off from the rest of the world. Who knows? Maybe one day we'll get the chance to visit this unique and fascinating continent. But until then, let's admire it from afar. Let's now talk a bit about the discovery of Antarctica. Unlike other places that were already inhabited, Antarctica never had a native human population. Ancient Greek philosophers had an idea about the continent and called it Antarctos, meaning opposite the bear. The bears it refers to are not the polar ones though, but rather the Great and Little Bear constellations, which are only observable in the northern hemisphere. As a result, the term signifies the opposite of the land of the bear. Whaling and sealing voyages in the late 1700s and early 1800s would venture further south when rounding Cape Horn at the tip of South America. It was known that going further south often meant stronger winds, but also the risk of hitting floating ice of all sizes and of winds and seas that could prove dangerous to the ship and crew. Captain James Cook was the first to cross the Antarctic Circle on January 17, 1773, in the Ross Sea region. He reached a point further north a year later, and though he didn't sight land, he came to within 50 miles and saw deposits of rock held in icebergs, indicating that a more southerly land existed. The first sighting of Antarctica is widely acknowledged to have taken place in January of 1820, during the voyage of two ships under the command of Captain Fabian Gottlieb von Bellingshausen, as part of a 2-year exploratory expedition around the world to discover new lands. The captain's ships were the first to have crossed the Antarctic Circle since Cook. The first undisputed landing on Antarctica didn't happen until much later, on January 24, 1895, at Cape Adare during the whaling voyage of the ship Antarctic, led by Henrik Bull. A small boat with 6 or possibly 7 men on board rowed ashore during calm conditions. You might not believe it, but Antarctica is actually a desert. With all that ice, you'd think it'd be like a winter wonderland with snowball fights and hot cocoa all day long. When we think of deserts, we picture camels and cacti and people struggling to find water. But in Antarctica, it's a whole different story. The struggle isn't to find water, it's to find anything that's not covered in ice. And the average rainfall has been just over 0.4 inches in the past 30 years. That's like a few drops of rain compared to what we're used to. So technically, it's not the dunes or sizzling heat that makes a desert, well, a desert. It's the lack of precipitation. But don't worry, if you ever find yourself lost in Antarctica, you won't have to worry about getting thirsty. Just make sure you bring a jacket and some mittens, because it's cold enough to make you into a popsicle. Not only is Antarctica one of the driest places on Earth, but it's also the coldest, the windiest, and the highest. Talk about overachieving. The penguins and scientists down in Antarctica have at times found themselves in a bit of a pickle when it comes to time. You see, unlike the rest of us on this big blue planet, there is no Antarctica time zone. All the lines of longitude meet at a single point at the South Pole, making it a bit of a head-scratcher when trying to figure out what time it is. Now, you might be thinking, but how do the scientists and researchers keep track of time down there? Good question. They typically stick to the time zone of the country they departed from. However, with stations from all over the world on the Antarctic Peninsula, things can get a little wacky. Imagine trying to coordinate with your neighboring countries without accidentally waking them up in the middle of the night. You might think that not much could survive in a place where the temperature is extremely cold, the sun barely shows up, and the wind could blow you away faster than a tumbleweed. Well, as in many places on Earth, life found a way in Antarctica too. Believe it or not, this frozen continent is buzzing with activity. It's home to billions of krill, which in turn attract lots of seals and more penguins than you can shake a fish at. But don't let their cute and cuddly appearance fool you. Penguins are the ultimate swimmers, with streamlined bodies that would make Olympic medal winners jealous. They come ashore to breed and chill, but their real talent is stealing pebbles from each other and forming mathematically precise huddles to stay warm. Antarctica is also home to the largest species of penguin on Earth. It's called the emperor penguin. Sure, these creatures are flightless birds, but that doesn't mean they can't jump. In fact, some of them can leap up to 120 inches. And let's not forget about the seals. With their furry bodies and special songs, these marine mammals are protected by the Antarctic Treaty, and they're thriving in the cool waters of the Southern Ocean too. But the real stars of the show are the whales. During the Antarctic summer, these huge creatures show up in droves to chow down on the abundant krill. It's indeed like a whale buffet down there. Do you know that NASA explores not only stars, planets, galaxies, or black holes? Hard to believe, but yes. The agency also works on discoveries here on our home planet Earth. So what has NASA recently discovered? Is there life under the ice? While they were analyzing data recently, they discovered something unbelievable hiding under Antarctica's ice. And this discovery not only changes everything we know about the whole water system of the Earth, but it may also help with research about life in space. Humankind's existence might depend on understanding Antarctica and its secrets. So, the recent discoveries reveal vital information about our survival. But before we continue, let's see how much you know about this place, where it's only ice as far as your eyes can see. Antarctica is one of the world's 7 continents in the southern hemisphere. It's the 5th largest continent in terms of total area, and that means it's almost twice the size of Australia. Want to see real meteorites? Go to Antarctica. Due to its dry climate, Antarctica is one of the best places to observe space. But what's even greater is that you can find meteorites on the white surface of the continent. Scientists have already plucked about 45,000 meteorites from the ice, and they think they can see another 300,000. Since there aren't many terrestrial rocks there, it's easy for them to spot them, thanks to their dark color. Antarctica's dry desert environment also helps preserve them, even the ones that fell to Earth more than 1 million years ago. And can you imagine any volcanic activity in Antarctica? It's hard. But this place is where fire meets the ice. West Antarctica is where most volcanic activity occurs. Scientists recently found that 138 volcanoes exist in West Antarctica alone. Wow. You would think that Antarctica is always cold, but no. Its coastal regions can get as warm as 50 degrees Fahrenheit. But have you ever wondered what Antarctica would look like if there were no ice? It may seem unimaginable now, but it was not always covered by ice. That was 34 million years ago, though, so nobody could tell how the continent's surface would be without the ice. But NASA changed that. They generated computer simulations and created the most accurate map of it as of today. What they saw was incredible. The continent was not flat at all like it seemed. It's pretty bumpy with valleys, rolling plains, and high mountains. But this was nothing next to what they had discovered under Antarctica's ice. So, what is it? Drum roll, please. NASA found 2 new subglacial lakes. And what's even cooler about it is that they spotted these lakes from space. How is that? If your answer is high-tech satellites, then you're right. In 2003, NASA launched a satellite called IceSat. It measured ice sheet mass balance and cloud and aerosol heights. The satellite also helped create the ice-free map of Antarctica. In 2010, the European Space Agency launched the second satellite, CryoSat-2. It was for tracking the changes in the thickness of the ice. Then, in 2018, NASA launched the third one, IceSat-2, a follow-on to the IceSat spacecraft. It measured ice sheet elevation and sea ice thickness. It was NASA's most advanced Earth-observing laser instrument. It delivered the highest precision data. And when that was combined with the data from the other satellites, it was possible to spot these 2 new lakes near a pair of larger ones. But how is it possible that these lakes exist in the first place? The average thickness of most Antarctica ice is approximately 1.2 miles. However, it can get over 1.8 miles thick in some places, especially during the winter. So, you might think that there's nothing under there, but science says otherwise. It's not quite possible to see it with your bare eyes, but the continent's ice is slowly but constantly flowing in different directions under the force of its weight. But scientists could not figure out how water moved for many years. That started to change in 2007, when data gathered from the IceSat provided insight into what hides beneath the surface. They first discovered an entire network of meltwater lakes connected under Antarctica's fast-flowing ice streams, and there were hundreds of them. Scripps Institution of Oceanography glaciologist Helen Amanda Fricker figured that the elevation changes measured by IceSat happened because of the dynamics of these lakes. They did not hold meltwater statically. Instead, they were filling and draining continuously over time through a system of waterways. And as they did that, the ice above rose and fell. But where do they drain? The ocean, of course, and it drains a lot. A recent study, co-authored by Fricker, found that the drainage of one lake flushed as much as 198 billion gallons into the ocean in only 3 days. Countless mysteries about how nature works are still waiting to be solved. But finding the 2 new lakes will give scientists a better picture of how fast the Antarctic ice sheet will change as the climate gets warmer, and how this will affect global ocean currents and sea level rise. The filling and draining cycle of the lakes also caused the ice sheet to suffer cracks and crevices. So, the information they find from these new lakes will also give them a better understanding of the damage on the surface of the ice. They will also be able to assess how this filling and draining system influences the speed at which ice slips into the oceans and seas. And that means they can evaluate how the added fresh water may alter marine ecosystems. This discovery may also suggest whether life is under the ice. Wow! Scientists drilled through about 3,504 feet of ice and found that water samples taken from one of the lakes contained approximately 10,000 bacterial cells per milliliter. Such a high number of bacterial life is a good sign, because that means the icy waters might also support higher life forms, such as microanimals, and one of these new lakes might even be their home. But the most exciting thing is that the new lakes might help them understand whether life on other planets is possible. Scientists believe any life below the frozen surface of the planet Mars might follow the patterns seen in Antarctica's lakes. So, there is a possibility that they might find critical new information on the type of life that may have existed on the red planet. You wouldn't want to be there during the winter, though. The lowest temperature on Earth you can experience is negative 128 degrees Fahrenheit. In 2010, there was an even lower temperature of negative 135 degrees Fahrenheit, and you may feel this cold much worse due to the strong and dry winds. Did you know that the size of the ice surface on Antarctica also changes throughout the year? It's about 1.2 million square miles during the summer, but when it's winter, it grows to 7.3 million square miles. Yet, despite the change, it remains the largest piece of ice on Earth. Sorry, Arctic, you lose. Do you know these cute little penguins? Consider these animals the locals because there is no native population in Antarctica. It's a no man's land because no single country owns it. But do you know who really owns it? 5 different species of penguins, seals, and killer whales. Ha ha. Despite the continent's harsh conditions, you can visit it as a tourist for fishing and research purposes. Around 5,000 people reside on the continent during summer at research stations. But when winter comes, the number naturally drops down to 1,000. Antarctica's ice blanket makes up 70% of the world's freshwater reserves. Imagine what would happen if it melted. The global sea levels would be raised by almost 200 feet.
Puna grasslands, Peru. A bare desert, rocky land, and one big nothing. Oh no, wait, there's Ureta. Ureta is a flowering plant that looks so unique, you might actually think it's photoshopped. That's how different it is from the rest of the desert. At first sight, it looks like some rocks covered in moss. But we're talking about a 3,000-year-old plant found in the freezing Puna grasslands of the Andes. This plant grows in packs, and they're so dense you could stand on top of a Ureta shrub, and it'd take your weight without problems. Spotted Lake, Canada. They call it the most magical spot in Canada. In winter and spring, this is just a regular lake that looks like any other. But try going there in the summer when the water starts to evaporate. It'll feel as if you've entered a different world, a polka-dotted landscape with blue, green, and yellow spots. Over the summer, there are over 300 pools there, and they look magical. Over the centuries, people believed each of them had different healing properties. Oh, and the explanation for the vibrant colors is pure science. Each of them has a high concentration of different minerals. Rio Tinto, Spain. For more than 5,000 years, the Red River has been surrounded by mines full of copper, silver, gold, and other minerals. They give the river its unique reddish color. People were mining that area for centuries until the whole industry started to fade out. The mines remained abandoned until they were rediscovered in the 18th century. The river is quite impressive, but it's also very dangerous for people because of its high acidity. The bacteria in the water create similar conditions that can be found in some other places in our solar system. For example, scientists believe there's something similar on one of Jupiter's moons, Europa. An acidic ocean is hidden underneath the moon's surface. Toyama Bay. If you're walking along the shore of Toyama Bay in Japan, you might be lucky to see mystical neon blue light. It's coming from underneath the water and lighting up the night sea. There aren't many places where you can see a phenomenon like this. It's the firefly squid that's responsible for the breathtaking show. The creature lives at a depth of more than 650 feet under the surface. But in spring, they gather near the coast. Sometimes, waves even wash them ashore. The light these animals emit is actually camouflage, which helps them to hide and protect themselves. During the day, the squids go back to the deep.
but they come back to party near the shore at night. The light they produce isn't so bright you could read a book in the dark, but it's still quite impressive. Fly Geyser, Nevada, USA. Imagine you're in a space rocket. At one point, you realize you've entered the atmosphere of some unknown planet. You haven't even realized it's there. The planet's gravity starts to pull your rocket down. Soon, it crash lands on the surface. Luckily, your spacecraft is sturdy enough to stay intact. So you pull on your spacesuit and crawl outside. Right in front of you, there's something you've never seen before. Incredible nature, unbelievable colors, and a bizarre mountain-like thing. And suddenly, it spews out a column of boiling water. You shake your head. This vivid imagination of yours. You're actually in Nevada, looking at Fly Ranch Geyser. Don't get disappointed, it's still marvelous. The geyser appeared in the 1960s when a geothermal power company drilled a hole. This allowed the groundwater to escape. And the colors similar to those you can see in Yellowstone National Park? All because of algae. Speaking of Yellowstone, that's another place that looks as if it's been imported from another galaxy. On an area bigger than the states of Delaware and Rhode Island combined, there are more than 10,000 hydrothermal features, 500 geysers, and incredible waterfalls. Singi de Bemaraha, Madagascar. Now here's the place where you can easily imagine meeting some ancient animals. You can almost see them hiding somewhere among the pointy rocks, going up to 330 feet. Half of this national park is covered in forest, and the other half is rocky, formed by the erosion of water. The place is home to many animals, like chameleons, iguanas, frogs, and lots of different lemur species. Vatnajökull Glacier, Iceland. On your quest for the extraterrestrial wonders of our planet, don't forget to drop by Iceland. There, you'll find the biggest glacier in all of Europe. In some places, the ice can be more than 3,000 feet thick. Vatnajökull has 30 outlet glaciers ready to be explored. Those are channels of ice that once flew out of an ice cap, but remained stuck within the borders of the valley. As for famous Icelandic ice caves, they're formed when meltwater runs through a glacier, trying to get to the surface. This usually happens in the summer, when temperatures are higher and the water flow is more turbulent. When the temperatures go down, the water freezes. That's how the caves are shaped. Staffa, Scotland, UK. Staffa is an uninhabited island that looks like a place from a different planet. Once you see it, you can't shake off the feeling it hides plenty of secrets. In reality, though, it's a calm spot, almost completely taken over by seabirds and seals. Even so, no one can argue that the incredible rock columns give this place a unique and mysterious look. It's always encouraged local people to spread legends about the unusual cave. The columns themselves formed millions of years ago, mostly because of volcanic eruptions. Glowworm Caves in New Zealand. Imagine finding an entrance to a magical cave. You row your boat, eager to sneak a peek inside, and get rewarded with one of the most beautiful views ever. You see a closed cave that looks as if it's under a magnificent starry sky. You don't need to travel all the way around the Milky Way to find something like that. Glowworm Caves in New Zealand are there for you. The caves started forming millions of years ago, and now they have an impressive collection of stalagmites and stalactites. But what makes them really special is glowworms. The caves are home to thousands and thousands of luminescent larvae. Worms need to attract insects and potential partners. To do that, they use their tails that glow in the dark. There are lots of caves like this in the area, and people have been exploring them for over 100 years. Wulingyang Scenic Area, Zhangjiajie, China. This amazing place has breathtaking sceneries and more than 3,000 sandstone pillars. They look as if nature decided to make its own version of skyscrapers. Some of them are half as tall as the Empire State Building. Usually, you can't even figure out where the pillars start. All you see when you try to make out what's there at the bottom is endless mist. Two natural stone bridges seem to be floating among the pillars, lost in the clouds. The Eye of the Sahara. That's a mystery that's remained hidden for millennia. This geologic formation is difficult to spot when you're standing on the ground. That's why it wasn't discovered until people started to explore space. For some time, scientists thought it was an impact crater created by some space object hitting Earth's surface. But after doing the research, they found out the origin of the Eye was entirely Earth-based. These days, geologists believe the Eye's formation started over 100 million years ago, when plate tectonics were pulling apart the supercontinent Pangaea. Molten rock, which was rising toward the surface, created a massive dome made up of different layers. Later on, volcanic activity and erosion finished the Eye's look. Baikal Lake, Russia. The deepest, the oldest, and one of the biggest freshwater lakes in the world is bound to have some secrets of its own. The lake is frozen from early January to May. In the summer, the water is so clear you can see up to 130 feet down. That's because melted ice from the Siberian mountains is incredibly pure. There are also no mineral salts in Baikal. Salar de Uyuni, Bolivia. It's one of the most extreme places in South America. The world's biggest salt flat stretches for over 4,000 square miles. It appeared when prehistoric lakes evaporated thousands of years ago. A thick, salty crust extends beyond the horizon. At one point, you're not even sure where the land ends and the sky begins. The Atacama Desert, Chile. The world's driest desert is all about rocky landscapes, salt lakes, dunes, and extreme temperatures. In some parts of the desert, there's been no rain for almost 500 years. With no water or nutrients from the ground, there are no plants. That's one of the reasons why you might feel as if you're on another planet, like Mars. But wait for the night to fall. An infinite sky full of stars looks like a window to the universe and its mysteries.
Now the first rule is not to panic, the guy says. He gives Michael a thick suit. The weather is hot here, and the outfit seems very warm. You can't go without it, he adds. Michael puts on the outfit and feels goosebumps all over his body. Why is it so cold? The guide explains this is a unique cooling cloth. It'll save Michael from heat stroke inside the cave. The guide gives him an oxygen tank and a mask. Are we gonna dive? Michael asks. No, but your lungs may fill up with water if you don't use it. Michael's knees are shaking with fear. He doubts this whole idea. Welcome to one of the most dangerous caves on the planet, the guy says as he enters the dark space at the foot of a mountain. This place is called Crystal Cave, and it's located in Mexico. Magma had leaked here from the hot bowels of our planet 26 million years ago. It was coming and cooling down again and again. There was so much magma that it formed a mountain. Along with magma, mineral-rich water got here. It had been seeping through the rock tunnels and had formed a cave under the hill. Then, something strange appeared in these hot waters, something that seems to be from another planet. Michael is going down the road. He illuminates the bottomless darkness with a flashlight. The air becomes hot and heavy. Microscopic particles of water are hovering here. Along with a guide, Michael descends to 980 feet. This is more than half of the Empire State Building's height. The air temperature goes up. It feels as if they were approaching the Earth's core. Finally, the descent ends, and they jump on solid ground. The guy puts on an oxygen mask and tells Michael to do the same. You can't breathe in such moist and acidic air. The lungs can fill with water, which will lead to disastrous consequences. The air here feels to Michael as if he's walking through a very thick fog. The temperature rises up to 136 degrees Fahrenheit. It's higher than in the world's most hot deserts. Michael lights his way and notices something big, white, and shiny. It's a huge crystal beam sticking out of the ground that's reaching up. The whole cave is filled with these huge things. They stretch in different directions and rest against the ceiling and the walls. Somewhere they block the path, and somewhere they are like bridges. Michael climbs onto one of the crystals and walks on it. The guide explains that each column is made of gypsum. You know this substance as it's used to produce building material, plasterboard. Michael touches the hard surface of one of them. It seems that some ancient civilization could have built it. The guide says that everything inside this cave is natural. For the first time, this place was discovered by 2 miners in the year 2000. Since then, scientists have managed to find out that some crystals are 500,000 years old. You can also find one of the largest natural crystals in the world here. This beam is about 36 feet long and weighs 55 tons. This place is filled with water rich in calcium sulfate. This element is capable of forming minerals. A colorless variety of gypsum prevails here. The water and warm air help form the crystals. Humidity and temperature haven't changed for centuries, so these columns continue to grow even now. This place is fascinating. Michael wants to stay here longer to explore the cave, but unfortunately, it's dangerous. They may get lost or slip on the gypsum rocks. Plus, they're running out of oxygen, so they have to climb back up. They come out of the cave and meet the police. It turns out that it's prohibited for tourists to enter the cave. Even scientists must get special permission to go here. And it's for a good reason, since the cave is one of the most dangerous places on Earth. Michael and the guy pay a fine and leave Mexico. The next stop is Italy. "It's a good thing you've taken a good camera with you," the guide says. "This is one of the most fascinating caves in the world. You need the best equipment to capture this beauty." Michael and the guide are on a small boat. They sail along the coast of the island of Capri, Italy. Luckily, there won't be any danger this time. They are approaching a small rift inside the mountain. This is the entrance to the Blue Grotto. The hole is so tiny that only one boat can pass through it. Michael and the guide get into another dimension. The cave is filled with water. The walls are shining with blue light coming from the lake's depths. Michael takes pictures of the cave and notices that the entrance they got through glows with a bright white light. It's the sun's rays illuminating the cave as they enter it. There's another hole under the water. The sunlight penetrates through it, filling the lake with a blue glow. But it's time to move on. The next cave is in New Zealand. They arrive to the North Island. There's a place deep underground with winding, intricate caves. They appeared here about 30 billion years ago. Michael and the guide approach the entrance to the dark cave. Michael turns on a flashlight. "Take it away," the guy says. "You won't need it inside." They come in. Michael opens his mouth in surprise. The whole cave is filled with glowing lanterns. They are all living creatures, fireflies. They're shining with a blue light. Michael feels like he's on another planet. The entrance to the cave is limited to not harm the fireflies. Scientists use automated equipment to monitor the cave. They watch the temperature and the level of carbon dioxide necessary to maintain the life of glowing beetles. If many people get here, the level of carbon dioxide will increase. The time for a visit is also limited, so they ask Michael and the guide to leave the place. "Now, we're going to see something creepy," the guide says. "Are you ready?" And the next stop is California. The place is called Moaning Caverns. The cave seems quite ordinary from the outside, but the guide looks a little nervous and scared. They attach the rope to the belt and begin the long descent. The bottom is 165 feet deep. It's the height of a 15-story building. It seems not so big compared to the Crystal Cave. As Michael is going lower, it's getting cold and dark. At this point, all sounds from above disappear. They slowly sink into an ominous silence. "What is it?" Michael asks, startled. "I think I've heard someone's voice downstairs." The guide touches his lips with his finger to keep Michael silent. A long, prolonged human moan is coming from the dark cave depths. In the first seconds, Michael freezes. Then he quickly climbs up along the rope. The guide laughs at him. They hear another moan. Michael gets out of the cave and pulls the guide's rope to get him out. The guide says this is one of the creepiest caves in the world. The air and wind circulate deep inside and create a sound similar to a moan. Tourists often go down there to tickle their nerves. Also, they found about 100 skeletons of ancient people at the bottom of the cave. And no one knows how they got there. Michael doesn't want to go back inside the cave. He asked the guide to tell him how caves form. It turns out that it all starts when the ground absorbs acid rain consisting of water and carbon dioxide. The liquid penetrates through the soil and comes into contact with hard rock surfaces. When water touches limestone or dolomite, it dissolves them and helps to form an empty space. Every year there's more and more space around. The rain continues to fall and accumulate in this open area. Then the water forms a stream or an underground river. After that, the erosion of hard rocks begins. Thousands of years later, there's enough space to fit a human here. Then this space becomes a cave. When erosion combines with stalactites and stalagmites, it forms chambers and impressive columns. By the way, here's the difference between stalactites and stalagmites. Stalactites hang from the ceiling. Stalagmites stick out of the ground. It takes about 1 million years to develop such underground landscapes. So, every time you walk in these places, you come into contact with the ancient past of our planet.
Discovering hidden places on our planet is extremely exciting. Today, I'm taking you on a trip that you aren't going to forget anytime soon. But suit up, this is about to get very cold. You hop on a plane and land on the ice-covered island of Greenland. An unbelievable view of the Aurora Borealis, aka the Northern Lights, is greeting you. You can't believe your eyes. Your guide tells you how rare this phenomenon is. Usually, people spend days trying to hunt it down. You feel lucky and take your time to appreciate these beautiful dancing greenish lights. You're glad you brought your camera along, aren't you? Between clicks, you learn that the Aurora Borealis is the result of some rather rough events. This spectacular light show occurs when energy particles from the sun slam into Earth's upper atmosphere. On day 2, you continue to explore the place by air. This may not come as a surprise, but Greenland is one of the world's largest islands. This time, on board a helicopter, you can see the infinite icy landscape. In case you're curious, you're now flying over 656,000 square miles of thick ice. Oh, what's that down there? It looks like a family of polar bears. You don't want to get too close, of course. The conditions in Greenland might be too tough for people to live there, but some animal species do very well in this land of ice. Those are reindeer, wolves, and Arctic foxes. On your way to Greenland, you probably made a pit stop in Copenhagen. Denmark is one of the few countries that have commercial flights to Greenland. You didn't know this before, but you find out that the island is actually part of the Kingdom of Denmark. On a map, it's right between the Arctic and Atlantic Oceans. You're lucky to have a local pilot that tells you about the secrets hidden in this scenery. Under this 2-mile thick white surface, there's an entirely different world. A world filled with canyons, meteor-carved craters, and millennia-old plant fossils. You are beyond excited to go visit one of these spots, but of course, you'll have to use your imagination, as all of it is hidden under ice. Believe it or not, nearly 80% of the island's surface is covered with it. The first stop on your tour is Greenland's Grand Canyon. You land not far from it, somewhere in the northern part of the island. You may know that canyons are deep, narrow valleys with steep sides, but I bet you didn't know that the word canyon actually comes from the Spanish word cañón, which means tube or pipe. Now, this Grand Canyon has some similarities with the one in the US. First of all, in size. It's at least 460 miles long and up to 2,600 feet deep in some places. There's a true subglacial valley down there, and if you're wondering how this happened, well, the canyon had probably been formed by a river that had been flowing through Greenland before the ice took over. Oh yeah, Greenland hasn't always been covered with ice. It was once green, no pun intended. Many other icy places on Earth, such as Antarctica, were once covered in greenery. Scientists have figured out that in the past, Greenland was mostly ice-free. With the help of airborne radar, they made amazing discoveries. By the way, ice is invisible to radar technology. If you have trouble believing it, try putting an ice cube inside your microwave. It won't melt or heat up. A recent discovery of fossilized plants allowed researchers to estimate that Greenland used to be much warmer than they could imagine. 2021 research conducted by the University of Vermont found fossils of twigs and leaves, which left researchers very confused. They expected to discover sand and rocks in the deepest layer of ice, but instead, they found some clear proof of rich flora. Judging by what you've seen of the landscape, it's hard to believe that forests were once growing here. Today, you'll find some tundra vegetation on the coastal part of the island, and that's pretty much it. But according to the genetic material found in these fossilized plants, researchers believe the island used to be much greener. It's very likely that there were insect-filled forests with butterflies and beetles flying around, and the average temperature on the island varied from 50 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer to 1 degrees Fahrenheit in the winter. NASA's Operation Ice Bridge has flown over Greenland more than 100 times. This has allowed researchers to create 3D maps of the island and figure out the age of each layer of ice in Greenland's ice sheet. Ice sheets can help answer many scientific questions as they form over the span of thousands of years. They're layers of snow on top of more snow. The snow gets compacted into ice, which in turn creates what we call an ice sheet. Remember those fossils we were talking about? They're believed to be from the Eemian period, which was 130,000 to 115,000 years ago. According to the groundbreaking 3D footage from NASA, we can see 3 distinct climate periods within the ice sheet. The uppermost layer is quite flat and uniform. If you decided to dig deeper, you'd find the layer formed during the last ice age. It's more complex and rugged. The ice there is darker than what you see on the surface. If you let your mind wander, you can picture what this part of the world looked like when mammoths were roaming around. If you kept digging, you'd eventually find leftover ice from the Eemian period I've told you about. Now, canyons aren't the only unusual thing found under ice. If you could sneak a peek under all those layers of snow, you'd see an impressive mountain range and also plunging fjords. In 2017, scientists created a map that showed what Greenland had looked like without all that ice. There was a bowl-like depression in the middle of the enormous island. This depression was most likely an ancient lake. Around it, there was a circle of coastal mountain ranges. This scenery probably resembled the landscapes of modern Patagonia. Big mountains with snowy tops surrounding crystalline lakes. This ancient lake in Greenland is a wonder on its own. Imagine a pit the size of Rhode Island and Delaware put together. The lake is believed to have covered over 2,700 square miles, and back in the day, it was fed by at least 18 different streams. These crystalline blue waters were surely very inviting, and freezing of course. But if you ended up going for a swim, I'd say be careful, as the water could get up to 800 feet deep in some places. On day 3 of your adventure, you discover a true under-ice water park. While you're wandering around the ice-covered island, your guide tells you to be mindful of the cracks in the surface. These cracks are responsible for the modern-day aqua lounge going on down there. Meltwater and rainwater flow down the cracks in the ice all the way down to the riverbeds. This forms a landscape of jewel-like lakes and streams filled with crystalline water. Researchers estimate that about 60 small under-ice lakes exist there. And yes, they're actual lakes. Perhaps one of the most impressive hidden features on this island is a meteor crater. Under the Hiawatha Glacier, you can find a 19-mile-wide impact crater, big enough to swallow the city of Washington. Apparently, a mile-wide iron asteroid struck Earth's atmosphere within the past 100,000 years and chose Greenland as its landing point. If anyone had been around to see it, they'd have witnessed a real show, a white glowing fireball cutting through the sky. Scientists speculate that if it had landed on an ice sheet, it certainly vaporized both water and stone. Someone standing hundreds of miles from the impact site would have heard a deafening thunderclap and experienced hurricane-force winds. But it actually makes sense. The approximate speed of meteors entering Earth's atmosphere is 45,000 miles per hour. For comparison, that is 2.5 times the speed of a spaceship. It's bound to make some noise and leave a huge crater in the ground.
The plane broke into 3 large pieces and crashed onto the hillside, scattering parts all over the snowy ground. The wings ripped off, and the main body of the aircraft split into two parts. Flames crackled from what was left of the airplane. 7 out of 9 crew members survived the crash. They were all part of the 1946 U.S. mission to map the Antarctic continent. There were 13 ships, 23 aircraft, and 4,700 people to do the job. They only had 2 months of summer down there before the weather got too bad. USS Pine Island took 3 seaplanes on their mission. One of the planes, called George 1, had a crew of 9 people. They went on their first 10-hour mission. Later, when it was time for the second flight, the weather got worse, with stormy seas and low visibility. But they decided to take the chance and fly anyway. It was supposed to be an epic adventure, and even the captain of Pine Island joined the expedition. The pilot, Ralph Frenchy LeBlanc, was very experienced and not worried about the weather. The plane was tied to some small boats, but the waves were so strong that the lines holding it were damaging the plane's metal body. Crew members had to attach 4 special rocket boosters, called jet-assisted takeoff bottles, to help the plane lift off. It managed to do so after a run of about 5 miles, but got straight into a blinding snowstorm. James Robbie Robbins was just 19 years old back then, but already had 1,500 hours of experience as a radar operator in that type of seaplane. He once successfully flew 9 hours through thick fog and clouds in Greenland, so he trusted his abilities. The radar showed a mountain range 20 miles ahead and icebergs spread out, and it was all correct. They had to stay low to take photos for mapping, and it was impossible in bad weather. So the pilot decided to turn the plane around to head back to the ship. Suddenly, the plane hit something. At the time, they didn't know what it was, but later they realized it was a snow-covered ridge that was hidden and couldn't be seen on radar. The loud bang shocked everyone on board. The pilot and co-pilot quickly pushed the plane's controls to try to lift it back into the sky. But just a few seconds later, the fuel tank in the front of the plane blew up. Collapsing with a ridge likely cracked one of the fuel tanks, so the gas started to leak. The fumes from the gas might have been set on fire by an electrical spark or the plane's hot engines. The blast was so strong that it broke the plane into 3 parts. The pilot was hurt and stuck upside down in the burning front part of the aircraft. Some of the other men were also badly injured. Some crawled out of the wreckage, and others had been thrown out into the snow during the crash. Most of them couldn't even remember the bang or the impact. The crew managed to pull the trapped pilot out of the wreckage and put him into a sleeping bag inside the back part of the plane. They also tried to help Frederick Williams, who was severely injured. They placed him on a piece of debris to keep him still and wrapped him in blankets to keep him warm. Unfortunately, even though they did their best to take care of them, Williams passed away a few hours later. Sadly, the navigator and the radio man didn't survive the crash either. 3 crew members had only 1 blanket, so they took turns staying in the middle where it was warmer. For the first 3 days, the weather was really bad. It snowed a lot, and the sky was super dark and cloudy. The crew started looking through the wreckage for anything useful. Near what used to be the back part of the plane, they found 3 big boxes of pemmican. It's a kind of emergency food that has everything you need to stay healthy, but it's not the most delicious food on Earth. Each box had about 100 paper cups filled with this special food. They also found better food in the flight rations. There were steaks, potatoes, canned veggies, bread, butter, salt, pepper, sugar, canned milk, a few cookies, and even 2 big cans of peanut butter. They had enough food to last for a while, and they figured the pemmican would help them get through the long, dark winter if necessary. All of the fresh food was hidden in the snow, where the kitchen used to be, so they had to dig it out. They got most of the sugar by licking it off the snow and separating it by taste. The crew also found a small 2-burner stove in the emergency supplies, but they didn't have any fuel. Luckily, the plane had some fuel left in the tanks, so they tapped one of the lines and had enough to last a long time. They kept the burners constantly on to melt snow to fill 2 or 3 water holders that held about 4 or 5 gallons each. It seemed like it took 15 or 20 pots of snow to fill just 1 cup of water. After 3 days, the weather got better, the sky was clear, and the sun was shining brightly. From where they were, they could see the ocean down the hill. While exploring the wreckage, they found more sleeping bags, a camera with film, and other supplies like a sled and a life raft made for 9 people. Days went by, and the sun never went down. Huge, hungry seagulls hanging out right next to the wreck were getting on everyone's nerves. To distract themselves a bit, the crew played an old Navy game called Salvo. It's like a battleships game for 2 players, where your task is to find and defeat all the ships of your rival. They also took some photos of everyone and the wreck from different angles with a Brownie box camera they had on the plane. The radar man painted big yellow letters on the airplane's wings with the names of the deceased crew members to make sure rescuers knew what had happened. On the 13th day, a rescue plane finally showed up. Everyone shouted, waved, and did everything to get the pilot's attention, but the plane didn't stop and kept flying. 2 hours later, it came back, and Robbins, in a hurry, threw fuel onto a pile of flammable stuff to set it on fire. The bang was so big, it burned his eyebrows, but it worked. The plane turned and flew toward them, wiggling its wings as a sign it saw them. The pilot dropped a note attached to a weight. It said, "If you can walk to the lake, make a circle. If not, form a straight line." The lake was 10 miles away, but they knew they had no choice but to get there, and so they made a circle, signaling that they were ready for rescue. Then they got to work. They stacked sleeping bags on a sled and placed their injured pilot on top. Robbins took a compass from the crashed plane and attached it to the sled's handlebars to help guide them. 3 men pulled the sled while another walked behind, making sure they stayed on track. The snow was so deep that they often sank up to their waists. The journey only got easier when they reached solid ground. So it took them 24 hours to walk the 10 miles to the shore. As they got close, a thick fog rolled in, so they couldn't see the rescue plane. But the pilot started the engines and the crew followed the sound. Soon, 2 rescuers arrived in a raft and helped them paddle out to the waiting plane. They climbed aboard and flew back to their ship, the Pine Island. All the survivors were taken to the USS Philippine Sea and later returned home. For 6 of the 9 men who crashed on Thurston Island, life continued.
Strange things occur in the cold waters of Antarctica. One of these things happened to a ship called Jenny. It was a small schooner whose history began in 1822. The boat and its crew set sail and disappeared a year later. For 18 years, the ship was considered sunk. People forgot about it, but in 1840, the vessel reminded the world of itself. That year, the whaling ship Hope sailed through the Drake Channel in Antarctica. The crew members noticed a ship among icebergs. It was the schooner Jenny. It was floating slowly in the dark, with no signs of life. The captain of the Hope, Mr. Brighton, gave the order to approach the mysterious vessel. They thought it was some creepy ghost ship, but as they came closer, they noticed crew members on the deck. The sailors of the Hope called out to them, but received no answer. This time, it became clear that something terrible had happened to the Jenny. When Brighton boarded, he realized that the Jenny crew members weren't missing. They were here. Frozen people stood like statues. Brighton went down to the lower deck and found the captain. He was sitting frozen at the table, holding a pen. Brighton looked at the logbook. The last record was made on May 4th, 1823. The captain wrote that he was the only living member of the crew. They spent 71 days without food. It seemed that the ship got lost in the sea because its captain went off course or sailed into an iceberg, but no one knew for sure. After that, nobody ever saw the Jenny again. According to rumors, the crew of the Hope abandoned the frozen ship and left it to drift in the cold waters. According to other rumors, this whole story is fiction. The story of the Jenny was described in a German magazine in the middle of the 19th century. Still, there was no further evidence of the ship's existence. Already in our time, Cambridge University decided to explore the case of the Jenny. The researchers discovered that one of the crew members of the Hope, who didn't disclose his name, told someone the legend of the frozen ship. Someone shared the story with another guy, and it was published in a German magazine called Globus. And that's all. There was no other evidence. One of the most famous ghost ships was the Mary Celeste, and there's no doubt about its existence. The history of this vessel was documented in court. People wrote about it in newspapers, but the most exciting thing is that the ship continued to be used even after 10 people disappeared from its deck. The history of the Mary Celeste began in Canada in 1861. When it was first built, the ship was called the Amazon. It changed captains several times, and it also hit some rocks. The boat was sold, bought, then sold again, repaired, and sailed under the name Mary Celeste. In 1872, it had a new captain, Benjamin Briggs. He was a decent, brave man with a lot of experience in navigation. He had a beloved wife, a daughter, and a son. When he went on his last voyage, he took his wife and daughter with him, and his son stayed in America. In November of 1872, the Mary Celeste sailed from the port in New York with 10 people on board and disappeared. 8 days later, another ship, the Dei Gratia, also left New York and followed the same route. Dei Gratia's captain, David Morehouse, noticed the Mary Celeste and immediately realized something was wrong. The ship was moving too freely, as if no one was controlling it. The captain tried to contact the crew members, but no one answered him. Then, together with other sailors, he climbed aboard the Mary Celeste. The ship was in good condition. There was no damage. The hold was slightly filled with water, but it could be easily pumped out. Everything seemed fine, but one lifeboat was missing. The crew members' valuables were in their cabins. The cargo was in the hold. The supplies of water and food were untouched. Judging by the records in the logbook, the ship was caught in a storm, but it was not too strong. Other ships also sailed through this storm, but nothing bad happened to them. The last record was dated November 25th, and it claimed that everything was fine. The sails of the Mary Celeste were slightly damaged, but perhaps it happened after the crew had disappeared. The whole ship was in excellent condition, but what made the people leave it? Part of the crew of the Dei Gratia stayed on board the Mary Celeste to bring it to dry land. Everything went well. They delivered the ship to the closest port. Next, the captain of the Dei Gratia appeared before the court and told about what had happened. However, the prosecutor and the judge didn't want to believe in the story of the Mary Celeste. They were sure the captain got rid of the ship's crew to get money for its cargo. According to the maritime laws of that time, if you found a ghost ship with valuable cargo, then a substantial part of this cargo belonged to you. So, many people thought that David Morehouse decided to earn some money. This version seemed to be more valid than the one about the mysterious disappearance of 10 people. Fortunately, no one accused the captain of committing a crime. They thanked him for his service and gave him a monetary reward. However, his reputation was damaged, which greatly affected his career, as many believed he attacked the crew of the Mary Celeste. But even after this terrible case, trial, and investigation, the story was not over. The Mary Celeste was still an expensive and efficient vessel. It sailed several times, but then one captain crashed it into the reefs to get insurance. The court revealed this deception and accused the captain of intentional property damage. The story of the Mary Celeste became famous all over the world. People began to build their theories, realistic and not. Someone believed the ship had sailed through the Bermuda Triangle, but this version was quickly refuted, as the route of the Mary Celeste passed thousands of miles away from the Bermuda region. Did the Kraken or another giant monster attack the ship? Nope. Since the boat was found in almost perfect condition, there were no signs of a struggle. One of the most popular versions was that the crew of the Mary Celeste stole some valuable cargo and sailed to Spain on the rescue boat. However, those who knew Captain Benjamin Briggs said he was a good, honest man. Besides, he had a son in New York, and Briggs would never leave him. A more thorough investigation revealed that a series of accidental circumstances could have caused the disappearance of the ship's crew. Before its last voyage, the vessel delivered coal. Perhaps the pump intended for pumping water got clogged with coal after that, and when the ship got into a storm, the hold filled with water and the pump broke. The captain couldn't understand the amount of water because numerous barrels in the cargo hold blocked the view. Benjamin Briggs assumed it was dangerous to stay on the ship during a storm, so he evacuated with the passengers on a lifeboat. Perhaps they were close to land and decided to sail there, but the storm intensified and overturned the boat. Also, one record in the log journal said that the chronometer was faulty. It was a device that helped to determine your location at sea using longitude. Briggs got lost and didn't know which way to sail. The storm was strong, and he couldn't determine whether the ship would sink. Perhaps Briggs decided to leave the ship in a rescue boat when he saw the coast of the Azores. The uniqueness of this ghost ship case is that, unlike many others, you can investigate it yourself. There's a lot of information about the Mary Celeste on the internet. There are documentaries and research articles. Perhaps you'll be able to notice something that others haven't seen and solve the mystery of the disappearance of 10 people.
It was the beginning of the 20th century, and two rivals, Robert Scott and Roald Amundsen, set on their expeditions to become the first people in history to reach the South Pole. The race wasn't easy, and it ended tragically for Scott. Amundsen has won and set his tent on the pole before his rivals. A member of Scott's expedition known as Terra Nova, British geologist Thomas Griffith Taylor, not only survived the harsh conditions, but also made an unexpected discovery. He found a waterfall of what appeared to be blood at the rocky base of the glacier, which now has his name, in 1911. It took scientists more than a century to figure out what is behind the eerie coloring. A team of American scientists journeyed to Taylor Glacier with powerful electron microscopes to analyze its contents. Previous studies had scratched the surface of the Crimson Enigma, but no one had previously done a full-scale analysis of its mineralogical makeup. These researchers unleashed a whole arsenal of analytical equipment and spotted little iron-rich nanospheres. These teeny-tiny particles, 1/100th the size of human red blood cells, originate from ancient microbes. They flourish abundantly in the meltwaters of Taylor Glacier. These nanospheres are jam-packed with iron, silicon, calcium, aluminum, and sodium, forming a unique composition that paints the subglacial water a vivid shade of red. These nanospheres don't have the usual crystalline structure found in minerals, which is why previous detection methods failed to spot them. Taylor Glacier's icy depths harbor an ancient microbial community that has thrived in isolation for thousands or possibly even millions of years. This discovery could help us in the search for life outside of Earth. Dr. Ken Levy, a research scientist at Johns Hopkins University, has some impressive expertise in planetary materials and the analysis of Martian samples. He decided to find out what would happen if a Mars rover landed in Antarctica. Could it figure out what makes bloodfalls so mesmerizingly red? So, researchers treated bloodfalls as a simulated Martian landing site. They used techniques inspired by the rovers exploring the red planet. The samples they collected were sent to Johns Hopkins processing facilities. There, Livy unleashed the power of transmission electron microscopy and revealed the enigmatic nanospheres. He made the conclusion that our current methods of analyzing other planets' surfaces with rovers fall short. They can't unravel the true nature of environmental materials, especially on chilly planets like Mars. These materials might be super tiny and non-crystalline, throwing off our detection methods. To truly grasp the essence of rocky planets, we'll need transmission electron microscopes. Strapping one onto a Mars rover isn't feasible yet, but it could mean a start of a new era in space exploration. Have you ever seen a waterfall on fire? Every February, when the stars align just right, Horsetail Fall in Yosemite National Park gets a sensational makeover. As the sun sets, its rays hit the waterfall at the perfect angle, transforming it into a blazing display of vibrant orange and red hues. We don't know exactly who and when discovered this natural miracle. The original valley dwellers may have known about it, but they kept it to themselves. It wasn't until 1973 that photographer Galen Rowell captured the first known photo of the waterfall, bringing it into the limelight. Since then, the firefall has become a global sensation, spreading like wildfire on social media and drawing crowds from far and wide. This magnificent cascade draws hundreds of spectators every year, but they can only see the show under certain conditions. First things first, Horsetail Fall needs a flowing stream. If there's not enough snowpack in February, the waterfall won't have enough water to create the magic. The temperatures must be warm enough to melt the snowpack during the day. If it's too chilly, the snow will stay frozen, and the fiery spectacle won't ignite. Second, we need a clear western sky at sunset. Those sunbeams need a straight path to hit Horsetail Fall and make it come alive. And since the weather in Yosemite is ever-changing, clouds can magically clear up just in time for the show. If all the conditions are just right, you'll witness the Yosemite Firefall in all its glory for about 10 minutes. The mystery of the sailing stones in California's Death Valley National Park has puzzled scientists for years. Heavy stones seem to have a mind of their own and move across Racetrack Playa, a dried-up lake bed. They leave behind a trail on the cracked mud. There were all kinds of theories to explain this phenomenon, from magnetic fields or dust devils, which are strong whirlwinds, to mischievous pranksters. No one has actually witnessed these rocks in action, which only added to the mystery. In 2006, a NASA scientist named Ralph Lorenz entered the scene. He was studying weather conditions on other planets, but he couldn't resist the allure of Death Valley and those elusive sailing stones. He had an eureka moment while tinkering at his kitchen table with a Tupperware container. Lorenz filled the container with water, leaving a small rock poking out, and chucked it in the freezer. Then he placed this icy construction in a big tray of water with sand at the bottom and gently blew on it. The rock began to glide across the water, leaving a trail in the sand. Lorenz had been studying how ice can make big rocks float and move along tidal beaches in the Arctic Sea. Applying this knowledge, he and his research team figured out that, under certain winter conditions in Death Valley, enough water and ice could form to make the rocks float across Racetrack Playa in a light breeze. And as they glided, they left their mark in the muddy terrain. The River of Five Colors, Cano Cristales in Colombia, has the unofficial title of the most beautiful river in the world. For most of the year, it looks like any other regular river. The real magic happens between the wet and dry seasons, when the water level is just perfect. This unique river floor is lined with a special plant, and when the conditions are right, it bursts into a dazzling display of colors. Think vibrant reds, stunning yellows, and lush greens, all mingling with the blue water. It's like stepping into a living rainbow with 1,000 shades in between. This phenomenal display only lasts for a few weeks, from September through November. During Colombia's wet season, the river flows too fast and deep, covering up the river floor and denying the plant the sunlight it needs to turn red. And in the dry season, there's simply not enough water to support the vibrant life in the river. So you have to catch it at just the right time. The reason behind Maldivian beaches glowing in the dark at night isn't a mystery, but it doesn't make them any less impressive. It happens thanks to the bioluminescent plankton. These tiny creatures are like little underwater disco balls, emitting a cool blue glow when they are agitated or on the move. Imagine walking along the shoreline and leaving behind glowing footprints. You can even take a night swim amongst these magical plankton. Researchers have discovered that their bioluminescence is actually a clever defense mechanism against predators. When these microorganisms flash their little blue lights, it disorients and surprises their attackers. The plankton produces this light using a chemical called luciferin. These enchanting plankton can appear at any time of the year. The best chances of seeing them in all their glowing glory are from June to December. During this period, there's a higher volume of plankton in the seas of the Maldives, creating the perfect conditions for a luminous show after the sun sets and the night sky takes over. You'll only witness the magic of bioluminescent plankton when tidal currents bring them close to the shore in large numbers. It's hard to predict exactly when this spectacular show will happen, so make sure to do your research and prepare to take photos with a high ISO to capture it, exactly like it looks in travel catalogs.
They say it's safer to get someone on the International Space Station than to evacuate someone from Antarctica in the winter in case of an emergency. So if you're wondering what it's like to be an astronaut but aren't ready to leave the Earth, consider the career of an Antarctica explorer. The desert conditions around the South Pole are much like those on Mars. The lowest temperature ever recorded here was almost minus 129 degrees Fahrenheit. You can find more meteorites here than anywhere else on Earth. Plus, there isn't any sunlight here for 6 months every year, just like in space all the time. So, NASA scientists use this land to test their space robots, to design the best astronaut meal plans, and to know what it would feel like to fly to another planet in complete isolation. The first people came here to stay on purpose for the whole winter in 1899. All 10 of them lived in a small cabin made of pine wood that was only about the size of 2 bedrooms. The windows were boarded up, and the roof was covered in sealskins. Heavy coal held it down to stop the wind from blowing it away. Even though it was tough, all the men survived except for one. More than 100 years later, the little hut is still standing and is the oldest building in Antarctica. Today, Antarctica has over 40 research stations that are open all year, and about 60 more that are used only during the warmer months. In the summer, up to 5,000 people live here doing their research. The places where they stay are much more comfortable than they used to be. No need for sealskins anymore. Belgium's futuristic Princess Elizabeth Station stays warm using sunlight and heat from people and electrical appliances. It's covered in shiny metal and built on strong rocks, with walls that are more than 1.5 feet thick. These walls have 9 layers of different materials like wool, paper, and wood. The temperature inside stays at a comfy 68 degrees, even when it's freezing at minus 58 outside. The eco-friendly station uses wind turbines and solar panels for power, and it makes more energy than it really needs. Brazil's Comandante Ferraz station is divided into 3 levels, kinda like a themed hotel. The top part is 30 feet tall and has bedrooms, restaurants, and other facilities to live comfortably. The middle part, which is almost 20 feet tall, is used for science experiments and maintenance. The lowest part, about 8 feet high, is where they store things and park vehicles. It also has video conference rooms, libraries, and living rooms. The station's height can be adjusted depending on the temperature and melting ice, so it stays safe and comfy for the people living there. This design also helps to minimize the impact on all the wildlife around it. Another interesting station is Britain's Halley 6 Antarctic Research Station, which looks like a robot from Star Wars. It's made up of 8 separate sections. The station sits on tall legs that allow the wind to blow the snow away. This way, it isn't stuck to the ground. The bottom is shaped like sleds, so they can move the station around when needed. This is important because it sits on a huge moving glacier, which slowly pushes it towards the sea. The station sleds let it be moved back regularly for important studies, like observing the atmosphere. This is the first research station that can be fully moved like this. Some scientists don't stay at research stations, but live in tents on the ice for days. They spend around half of the time trapped inside because the wind blows some serious amounts of snow on the tents and blocks the exit. They say it feels like exploring space. One earthly question, though, is how they use the bathroom while out exploring in Antarctica and not at a research station. There aren't any real bathrooms unless you bring or make one. Some explorers use a special tent just for that, or build snow walls or igloos for privacy. All waste has to go with them when they get back to the research station. You can't just leave the waste in the wild there, according to the Antarctic Treaty System that regulates all human activities. It could harm the local environment. So, at the end of the season, they send it back to their home country in special containers. So nothing stays in Antarctica. Each research station gets its fresh water in different ways. In the past, people had to shovel snow and ice into big tanks and then heat it up to melt it into water. Now they mostly pump water from a lake that forms when ice melts and store it in a heated building. On average, one station needs about between 2,500 and 4,000 gallons of water every day. To save water, people can only take 3-minute showers. When water is running low, they might only be allowed to shower every second or third day. Building new constructions in Antarctica isn't exactly easy because of snow that can pile up as high as a 1-story building, super strong winds blowing at 85 miles per hour with even faster gusts, and temperatures dropping really low. The weather only allows transportation for about 12 weeks each summer, so some stations take years to finish. Storing everything once it arrives is tricky too, because there's not much space and the weather is extreme. Most materials stay in their shipping containers, and for things that need to stay warm, they bring special heated storage containers. So, architects have to get creative with designs and try to use less building material. India's Baradi polar base, for example, is made from 134 shipping containers. These containers were used to bring the materials to Antarctica, and then they became part of the building itself, covered with a special insulated shell to keep it warm. In the future, scientists might build Antarctic bases that don't need much material from outside at all. In 2009, David Garcia from a Danish company had a cool idea called the Iceberg Living Station. This would be a base with many rooms, big enough for 100 people, dug right out of the packed snow or icebergs that have broken off from the ice shelf. A group of scientists from different countries spent 26 weeks together in the Rothera Research Station. Among them were a couple of Americans, an Icelandic mechanic, a few Germans, some Scots, and a Welsh speaker. They rarely had a chance to contact their loved ones back home because it was too expensive to call on the satellite phone. With just each other for company and not many things to do for fun, they talked a lot, during work, breaks, and while playing pool. They discussed everything, mostly weather, like the wild weather and icebergs. They all used English for communication. Over time, their accents started to change. They didn't notice it at first, but they were part of an experiment where they recorded their voices regularly. They would say the same 29 basic words, like food and coffee. When the recordings were sent to a team in Germany, they found that some of the words were pronounced differently. It was clear that a new accent was starting to form. They started to pronounce the OU sounds in words such as flow and disco differently. We normally pronounce it from the back of the throat, and in their case, it shifted to the front of the mouth. 6 months isn't such a long time when it comes to language changes, but such things happen when people are cut off from others. When they talk to each other a lot, they remember how the other person sounds and start copying it without even realizing it. This could help us understand why American and British English became so different. The people on the Mayflower were in similar circumstances. They were isolated when they traveled to North America. If you want to speak like an Antarctic winterer, here's some of their slang you can quickly learn. Fodplod means picking up rubbish. Fod stands for foreign object debris. If someone tells you it's a dingle day today, they mean the skies are clear blue. A smoko is a tea or coffee break. Gonk means sleep. And my absolute favorite is fox hat. It means the base cinema night. The ground suddenly starts shaking. Clouds of gas start forming in the sky, making it dark during broad daylight. Bits of the ground start swelling, lifting, and even collapsing. These are the telltale signs of a volcano that is bound to erupt. And this is what could easily happen again with Mount Spur. It's only about 75 miles from Anchorage, one of Alaska's busiest cities. More than half of the population of the northernmost state of the US live there. There's also a huge amount of air cargo that passes through its international airport daily. So anytime a volcano this close to such a vital hub begins to get restless, people start paying attention. Just FYI, approximately 350 million people in the world live within the danger range of an active volcano. That means that around 1 out of 20 people live in an area at risk of volcanic activity. Alaskans probably wish that Spur's reawakening was fiction, but it's actually true. The Alaska Volcano Observatory picked up on several of these "I'm about to erupt" signs from Mount Spur. So much so that they raised the alert level to yellow, which means unrest above normal background levels. Spur erupted twice in the 90s, and it was pretty intense. If we were ranking volcanic eruptions on a scale from 1 to 10, these eruptions would rank a 6 or 7. Not that terrible, but still worth 10 to 17 million in damages. However, these numbers are nothing compared to Alaska's 1988 Redoubt eruption, another volcano that erupted and summed up a staggering $345 million in damages. Mainly because its ashes hit aircraft engines, such as the KLM 747 that lost power after all its engines went off due to the ashes. If people weren't paying attention to Alaska's unstable geology before that, well, they surely started to after it. When you think of the hazards of volcanic activity, the first thing that might possibly pop in your mind is Pompeii, Italy. Of course, that's the worst-case scenario, a city being engulfed by lava. Spur may seem innocent compared to Vesuvio, but it still took its toll. The last time it erupted in the 90s, and it threw volcanic aerosols over 60,000 feet into the atmosphere. Let's get our science straight here. Think of volcanic aerosols like liquid particles that are released into the atmosphere during an eruption. These particles are usually created when gases from a volcano, such as sulfur dioxide, combine with water and other particles that exist in our atmosphere. These aerosols can actually cool the Earth's surface since they reflect sunlight directly back into space. And that's not the worst part. It can stay in the atmosphere for several years after an eruption, causing lots of health issues. The eruption unleashed blazing fast avalanches of hot gas and ash called pyroclastic flows, along with thick, muddy floods known as lahars. Oh, and there were also the massive volcanic boulders. These rock chunks were huge, some over 3 feet long, and they blasted out from the volcano like nature's cannonballs, landing more than 6 miles away. All that volcanic heat melted part of a nearby glacier, kicking off debris flows that dammed up the Chakachatna River and created a whole new lake along the valley. Some good came out of Spur's first eruption, though. The main lesson was, volcanic monitoring pays off. The local monitoring was able to reduce the economic damage done by the eruption, especially for a city that has an intense air traffic. Spur is deemed as dormant for the moment, but it could go off anytime soon. You see, volcanoes are classified as active, dormant, or extinct, depending on how much action they're putting on. If it's still active, it's still rumbling and erupting somewhat regularly. Dormant means it's had some recent activity, but it's still lying low for now. And extinct, that's when it's been quiet for such a long time that we figure it's done for good. One of the US's most dangerous active volcanoes is Mount St. Helens. This volcano is actually responsible for the most powerful eruption in US history. Its last blast was so intense, it threw off about 1,300 feet off its summit. Basically, the top of the mountain vanished, and if you thought Mount Spur's ash cloud was impressive, St. Helens wins the competition since it launched its ashes 80,000 feet into the sky. Eastern Washington plunged into total darkness. But it wasn't just that. In a matter of 3 minutes, the eruption hurled 3.7 billion cubic yards of blazing rock and dust, enough to fill 1 million Olympic-sized pools across 230 square miles of lush forest. Actually, the earthquakes that anticipated the eruption started weeks before May 18, 1980. A ground shake of magnitude 5.0 went off, triggering a landslide on one side of the volcano. By the end of the official eruption date, 57 people had lost their lives. Nearly 7,000 big-game animals like deer and elk were wiped out, and millions of birds laid scattered on the burnt earth. Researchers don't think St. Helens will blow at the same magnitude again anytime soon, but they're keeping an eye on it, because this volcano is not exactly finished. By the way, the word volcano comes from the Roman name Vulcan, which was the Roman deity of fire, and they often happen at the meeting point of tectonic plates, which are the pieces of the Earth's surface that fit together like a jigsaw puzzle. The so-called Ring of Fire, located in the Pacific Ocean, is the world's danger zone when it comes to volcanoes. It contains between 750 and 915 active volcanoes. The largest volcano located in the Ring of Fire, also the largest active volcano in the world, is the Mauna Loa. It's over 13,000 feet high, and it's located in Hawaii. Researchers say that Mauna Loa has been erupting for at least 700,000 years. Its most recent eruption began on the 27th of November 2022, and it lasted until December 13th. It's been quiet since the 80s until it decided to wake up again. Thanks to constant monitoring by the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory, it didn't cause any casualties when it last erupted. Scientists have been investing big time on volcanic monitoring, not only to reduce economic hazards, but also to save lives. The most recent attempt has been to drill into volcanoes. Recently, a group of scientists went all the way to Iceland in one of the world's volcanic hotspots. There are around 33 active volcanoes in Iceland alone, but the one that is the most interesting to them the most is the Krafla volcano. The Krafla has erupted around 30 times in the last 1,000 years, and its most recent eruption was in the mid-1980s. The project named Krafla Magma Testbed, or KMT for short, is hoping to advance the understanding of how magma behaves underground. The main advantage of this drilling research is predicting the risk of eruptions, but it can also help to push geothermal energy forward. I mean, can you imagine having electricity that is run by the limitless source of volcano power? The KMT team will begin drilling holes deep into volcanic ground in 2027. They're aiming at reaching over a mile into the ground. After all, it's different to monitor lava activity when it's on the surface than when it is still below ground. This will allow researchers to listen to the pulse of the Earth, according to them. They're saying this research is as revolutionary as the first time man went to the moon. Oh, and speaking of that, I was shocked to discover that volcanoes exist all throughout the solar system. Yep, other planets and moons have volcanoes too. The largest volcano in our solar system is Olympus Mons on Mars. It's a shield volcano, much like the ones that make up the Hawaiian Islands. It's about 370 miles wide. If we transported it all the way back to Earth, it would almost occupy all of Poland. Yikes.
There's not much to do in Antarctica except scientific work. You could check out the wildlife, like some cute penguins and seals, and you'd get to see the occasional whale swimming around. Antarctica is one of the biggest lands out there that's only inhabited by scientists and researchers from all over the world. These scientists dug a hole through some pretty thick ice to study the ancient air and how the atmosphere cleans itself. They used a special drill and dug a clean cylindrical hole 450 feet below the surface. Some of this ice can be up to 800,000 years old and is a good indicator of what the climate was like in the past. It's like checking out tree rings to determine how old a certain tree is, except it's more complicated than that. After the effortless digging, they decided to drop some ice to the bottom of the hole to see what would happen next. They heard some really unusual sounds. It felt like being on a spaceship traveling through a bunch of obstacles with many rocks smashing into each other. The pitches changed over the quick descent of the block of ice, ranging from high pitch and ending with a low heartbeat-like sound. The scientists were puzzled when they first heard this and dropped some more ice, only to find out that the same type of sounds were being produced, just in different variations. They couldn't tell what was down there, and, more importantly, why these kinds of sounds were produced. Antarctica boasts quite a few volcanoes, many of which are under super thick sheets of ice. Scientists discovered 91 volcanoes and claimed there could be more, potentially making it the most extensive volcanic region in the world. While they were doing regular scientific research, they came across many unmistakable large cone-shaped figures underground. Some were as deep as 2 miles in the ice. Some of the peaks were over 3,000 feet tall and dozens of miles across. But on the surface, it's as plain as a sheet of paper. They may have dropped that block of ice inside an actual volcano that they were standing on, but it's unlikely. Even though the underground volcano presence was discovered by accident, there's a small chance they were actually standing on one where they had their workstation set up. It's more likely that they worked in an area where studying ancient climates is easier and less dangerous than other places. They collect ice samples and study them in a lab. It's like discovering a prehistoric insect embedded in amber millions of years ago when dinosaurs used to roam the land. But instead of little bugs, scientists study ancient dust, air bubbles, sea salts, volcanic ash, and anything else that may have come from the environment. They can practically tell how the climate was during that time. These ice samples might show that Antarctica's western ice sheet melted when the Earth's climate warmed up. If it did, then it's likely to happen again. That would mean sea levels rising, affecting coastal cities and small remote islands. But scientists aren't sure it's true, despite some evidence to back it up. The process of studying ice samples can take a week or even a year, depending on what they find. They crush or melt the sample bit by bit. And like those tree rings, the deeper the layer, the further we go back in time. In order to study ancient bubbles trapped in ice, researchers have to crush the samples under a vacuum hood to keep the air out while extracting the air and putting it in vials. There are various instruments and devices to study the ice samples, but because it's so sensitive to damage, each measurement must be in a clean room setting so that nothing gets compromised. The scientists have to wear proper bodysuits and many layers of gloves and constantly get ventilated. Even something as tiny and insignificant as a fingerprint can ruin a sample. They look for certain patterns to see changes in the atmosphere's composition and temperature. But dropping a few blocks of ice down a hole wouldn't be so bad. The reason why it made such a peculiar sound is the same reason why a moving car sounds different when it's honking than when it's stationary. The scientific word for it is the Doppler effect. It's an obvious change in the frequency of a wave with respect to an observer who is moving relative to the wave source. The effect doesn't mean the frequency of the sound changes, it just shifts. And this can be said about other types of waves, like water and light. But sound waves are the most popular ones when it comes to the Doppler effect. So, when the scientists dropped the ice block down the bottom of the hole, the sound waves traveled back up and bounced around the narrow tube where they drilled. That's why they got the pew pew sound. Let's not forget that this ice block traveled 450 feet beneath us. Oil ships dig holes in the oceanic crust that go thousands of feet beneath the Earth. The Kola Super Deep Borehole in Russia is the deepest hole ever made by humans. It goes more than 40,000 feet below the surface and took almost 20 years to reach 7.5 miles. Below it is only half the distance to the mantle. In terms of the whole Earth, this very deep hole is literally scratching the surface. This wasn't a hole to dig for oil, and wasn't in the ocean either. The drilling was stopped in 1992 when the engineers found out that the temperatures were 100 degrees Fahrenheit higher than they predicted. And then it was abandoned, and it's just been a barren hole now. but that's the closest we've dug to the center of the planet. The scary thing is that some of the workers on the site could hear voices coming from within. All the way in Yemen, an ancient hole exists in Barhout, in the east of the country in the middle of the desert. It's actually closer to Oman than to the capital Sana'a. This hole has puzzled experts and locals. Unlike the holes in Russia and Antarctica, this wasn't man-made. Or was it? It's been around for many years, and the locals try to steer away from it. They don't even like talking about it, since they claim it brings bad luck to those around it, or to whoever utters its name. They claim it was created as a prison for spirits, but many rule that out. The hole is 98 feet wide and somewhere between 330 to 650 feet deep. You can also hear strange sounds coming from the inside. But according to some scientists, the well has little to no ventilation and barely has any oxygen down there. So it's unlikely that anyone or anything lives down there. The Challenger Deep in the Mariana Trench caught some low-pitched grumble sounds in March of 2016. Some of these grumbles were followed by screeches. They caught these sounds in a span of weeks, using a titanium-encased microphone so that the immense pressure of the lowest point on Earth wouldn't crush it. They had to lower it slowly as well, since it's 1,000 times the atmospheric pressure at sea level. For 23 whole days, the microphone recorded typical sounds of whales passing by and boats sailing across from above, and even rumbles of nearby earthquakes, but they still couldn't determine what caused those initial sounds. The researchers couldn't understand if the noise from the bottom of the Mariana Trench was caused by humans or was natural. They also wanted to know if these sounds affected marine life, like dolphins and whales that rely on echolocation. They still can't figure it out, but scientists estimate that the ocean is about 10 times noisier than it was 50 years ago. With technological developments in shipping, submarines, and underwater construction, the ocean will only get louder with time. Northern lights come with sounds, which nobody talks about. They're usually audible when the auroras are at their most powerful presence. Scientists were always puzzled as to what caused the faint popping and crackling, even though they were very far above us. They used some special microphones and found out that the sounds came just 230 feet above us, which is pretty low. They're caused by electrical charges gaining power in a specific region of the auroras. The electrical charges are disturbed by magnetic storms that fire up the northern lights. As a result, some tiny sparks are released into the atmosphere, causing the faint crackling and popping noise.
Antarctica. It was once a green land full of dinosaurs, but now it's a frozen continent bigger than that of the U.S. that doesn't belong to anyone. It isn't hard to find. Wherever you go, just go south until you get to the big icy thing at the south pole of our planet. It lies within the Antarctic Circle, and it's the largest single mass of ice on Earth. The continent is bigger than the U.S. and even bigger than all of Europe. And still, Antarctica was officially discovered recently. Scientists hadn't known of its existence until 1820. After the discovery, it took another 2 decades to confirm it was a whole new continent, and a few more decades after that to decide on a name. In Antarctica, anti means the opposite, so Antarctica literally means the opposite of the Arctic. Now, even before scientists discovered the land, ancient Greeks already theorized that there must be a southern continent to balance out the Arctic in the north. Also, some scientists who studied Polynesian artwork and oral history believe that Polynesians found the continent over a millennia before the Europeans did. Anyways, today we all know of this icy land at the South Pole. Because of its location, there are just 2 seasons there, summer and winter, and both last 6 months. In summer, it's a bit warmer, and the continent exists in pure daylight. And in winter, it's dark all day long. 98% of Antarctica is ice. This continent alone stores 60% of the planet's fresh water. And yet, despite all those water reserves, Antarctica is the biggest desert in the world. By definition, a desert is an area with sparse vegetation and little snow or rain. Notice that plenty of sand isn't a necessary condition here, even though the continent does have some sand and even sand dunes. It also gets a lot of wind. Antarctica is the windiest continent on Earth. and wind speeds can reach 200 miles per hour. That's even faster than hurricane winds. The little snow the land gets never melts. It just builds up over time, for centuries and millennia. So there's a thick ice layer there. This makes Antarctica full of hidden secrets. There's a whole new world underneath its ice. For example, there are a lot of mountains on the continent that are like 9,000 feet tall. It's taller than 3 Burj Khalifas stacked on top of each other, if we must, and that's currently the tallest skyscraper in the world. But we don't see all those mountains because they're all hidden under the ice sheet that's almost 16,000 feet thick. There's also a lake down there, beneath over 11,000 feet of snow. The lake is called Lake Vostok, named after Vostok Research Station, under which it's located. Originally, it was just a hypothesis. Over a century ago, a scientist suggested that the huge pressure created by tons of ice could decrease the melting point of ice in the lowest layers of the ice sheet, creating liquid water, which could form a lake. He didn't prove his ideas in his lifetime, but others continued his work and confirmed that this theory was true. There's also a canyon in Antarctica, hidden underneath huge masses of snow too. It's deeper than the Grand Canyon we have in Arizona. There is a mountain range that divides the continent into 2 parts, East Antarctica and West Antarctica. The western part of the continent is experiencing higher temperatures and is starting to melt. If West Antarctica melts and releases its stored water, it will raise the average global sea level by about 16 feet. That will be enough for some cities all over the world to completely disappear. Perhaps the first to turn into a water world will be Thailand's capital Bangkok, which is just 5 feet above sea level. Then it will be Amsterdam in the Netherlands, followed by Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam, Cardiff in the UK, and New Orleans in the US. People do a lot of work in Antarctica now, residing there for many months at a time to study this mystery of a continent. Over the years, even a few children were born there. But it's not a country, and the land doesn't belong to anyone. It's governed by the Antarctic Treaty System, an agreement of peaceful research and collaboration that suspends all territorial claims. It was first signed by 12 nations, and now there are 59 supporters, half of whom have decision-making powers. The continent is occupied all year round by researchers from all over the world. There are about 5,000 people living there in summer and about 1,000 in winter. Yet no one is a permanent resident there. People come and go, and the scientists take turns spending time there. The average yearly temperature there is negative 30 degrees. But there was a time when Antarctica was about as warm as Melbourne, Australia is today. It was about 40 to 50 million years ago. I wasn't around then. But the continent had green forests and dinosaurs roaming its land, chilling in the sun in a 63-degree Fahrenheit environment. That was before penguins. In our age, it's so cold that you won't even find any trees or bushes in Antarctica, just the snow. The only plants that can thrive in such extreme temperatures are lichens, moss, and algae. People can't stand such freezing conditions for lengthy periods of time either, so the continent has never had any indigenous population. Well, that is, if we don't count penguins, seals, whales, and a few other types of birds that live there now. Antarctica's fauna is the scariest and least diverse on the planet because only a few organisms can withstand its harsh conditions and because non-natives aren't allowed to be brought there. So, if you decide to travel to Antarctica with your cat, well, you can't. Hey, I don't make the rules. But those few species that live on the South Pole totally own the place. There are no more than 5,000 people there and around 20 million penguins. They are a kind of settlers, though. Penguins' first ancestors lived in Australia and New Zealand. There are still a few penguin species there, including the smallest penguin on Earth that is just 1 foot tall. Still, most of the penguins migrated to Antarctica at some point, possibly because they were attracted by the greater food supply there. It's not the cold that made them like the land. It turns out, most penguins leave the continent when the summer ends. The only ones that stay there are male emperor penguins, and they do it to warm and protect eggs left by their mates. But where do all the other penguins go? At first it was a big mystery even to scientists, but then they attached some tiny location devices to the legs of a few of these animals and figured it out. Penguins go to live in the southern oceans while it's too cold in Antarctica. None of them go ashore for half a year until they get back to the continent. When they come back, it's when those eggs, left for male penguins to nurture, start hatching, and so penguin families can be together when it happens. Penguins eat different fish, and the ocean is full of those despite its cold temperature. In some areas, water can reach below freezing temperatures because it's salty. But fish don't freeze there because they have antifreeze proteins in their bodies. Then there are also about 1 million seals in Antarctica. They like fish too, and they can hold their breath underwater for 2 hours. They see way better underwater than in the bright light of the day, and they also use their whiskers to locate food. Their breathing holes in the ice can freeze while seals are away, and they must use their teeth to make a new one. Seals can even sleep underwater and then resurface occasionally to get some air without waking up. I can appreciate that.